I, 31M, started a relationship with my ex, 25F, we'll call her N, in April of 2021. The relationship moved extremely fast and N would tell me about how she'd prayed and begged for someone like me, could see me being her husband, her last relationship, the one she wants to start a family with. Though, fairly quickly in the relationship, within 1 to 2 months, if I ever brought to her a concern like how something she said affected me, she argued. She would immediately start yelling at me and saying, "Well, have you ever stopped to consider that I might be stressed out?" And similar things to avoid talking about what I brought up. She would continue this as well as tell me that people who love each other just get over things like that because they know it doesn't mean anything. For the entirety of our relationship. I recall one time she fell asleep at my house and woke up around 1 a.m. yelling at me that now she has to drive home and finish laundry before work the next day, and why would you ask me to lie down with you? Or one night where she did stay at my house and in the morning immediately dumped a story onto me about how a coworker, who no longer works at her job, stalked her for months and made sexual advances towards her as well as a multitude of other information. I told her it was a little unsettling to hear all of this, though I know she was the one who had gone through it, but that immediately after waking up was a hard time for me to receive this information. She became irate with me, told me she just won't talk to me about anything anymore since I don't give a fuck, and when I looked at her after hearing these things she just yelled, "What the fuck are you looking at? Can I help you?" As the relationship progressed, I also let her know I was uncomfortable with her male boss texting her at 11 p.m/12 am randomly while he was drinking. I thought it was disrespectful and we had a short talk about it as she said she was also uncomfortable with it but didn't want to make any waves at work. She said that if you don't fit in at this job they fire you. She informed me she would set a boundary with her boss to keep texts work-related and within a more reasonable time frame. However, this never changed. Approximately 1 month later we had another talk, and fight, over the same issue. N told me that she only ever uses one-word responses to end the conversation but she isn't going to tell her boss anything about not texting her anymore because she isn't going to hurt her chances of moving up in the company. Eventually, we talked this out a bit more and N showed me the text messages between her and her boss, and I saw that they actually talk quite often, sending long paragraphs of messages to one another about their home lives, issues with relationships, housing and family problems, as well as N sending her boss pictures of her and her little sister trying on prom dresses when N took her sister shopping. N told me she knew the context of their conversations wasn't right and that she'd been dishonest with me about them. I also saw that a different coworker she'd given her number to recently texted her, flirting, telling her, "I always knew you thought I was fine," etc. She apologized for lying to me and told me she forgot this other coworker had texted her and promptly informed them that I wasn't okay with the conversation. The coworker apologized but as far as I knew, N hadn't notified her boss of anything. Shortly after this an ex-boyfriend of N told her he'd had a dream about her that got wild. I told her it's strange for an ex to tell her he had a dream of them sleeping together which she fought tooth and nail. Eventually I told her to just ask him what he meant by it and he clarified, stating that they'd had sex in his dream. N went on to tell me I would never understand what their relationship was like and that he'd been there for her through some of the worst times of her life. I told her having the dream isn't a bad thing, it's a dream, but going out of his way to tell her while he also has a significant other is just bizarre. Like many times before and many times after, N told me, "Well, I was having a good night with you. Now we're here." Or similar, making it my fault I was hurt by something rather than realizing the behavior isn't conducive to a productive monogamous relationship. And made mention to me multiple times that she'd always shared location with her exes. I had never, not that I didn't care to, but that I was indifferent to it and no one had ever asked me to. Anne visited a shop one day and on her way back called me to tell me that she was almost in a really bad traffic crash where she may have been critically injured. She told me she wasn't sure if she would have been able to call me or talk to me if she'd been injured or died. I told her, "I think we should share location. If you ever get hurt I can just come to you ASAP." She agreed, and we shared location for a short time. However, this led to the behavior I was worried about by sharing location, like checking it periodically without good reason. So, I checked her location one time around 10 a.m. I worked 5 a.m. 1 p.m. She worked 9 a.m. to 5 p.m., since she'd disappeared through text the night before fairly early. Her location was turned off but it hadn't stopped being shared with me. I brought this up to her later in the day and she said that's odd, try it again, and it was back on. My gut told me she'd just turned off location services. I had to Google how this worked, but I chose to believe her. A few days later I brought it up again and told her I was sorry for assuming she was lying to me and that she'd turned off her location. I have issues and trauma from my last relationship where I was cheated on and lied to repeatedly and I'm working to fix that and so I choose to trust you. And got news that she was going to be unable to stay in the house she'd been in due to family issues around May of 2021. Through news of this as well as her sick grandmother and other family affairs, I had been an outlet for her to vent to and bounce ideas off of. Eventually, I suggested we find a place to move in together to give her some peace of mind on the home front. We eventually did move in together in September of 2021. However, slightly before this I'd become a bit paranoid due to the conflict and lying I'd been experiencing from her, and I did go through her phone. I am not saying this is okay behavior by any means, I just felt there was a catalyst. I found numerous videos and pictures of her sleeping with another man as well as her naked with another female, she is bisexual, as well as videos that she and I have made. I brought up to her that I had concerns that she still had media on her phone with other people and she told me, I think I have one video? I just haven't gone into my hidden photos in so long, except we've made media and she's referenced watching it over, but I'll take a look. She checked and told me, okay, I found it. It was just one video and I deleted it. I told her I knew she was lying to me and why, that I'd gone into her phone. She got very upset with me for going through her phone and yelled a bit though I continued to address the videos and photos. I asked if she'd deleted the photos of her and the other female as well and she eventually said, no, I like them. I'm the only one who has them. To which I had nothing to say. I couldn't understand why someone in a committed relationship would choose to keep naked media from past relationships/flings. I used this opportunity to ask again if she turned her location off when I'd thought she did before. She said no, absolutely not. I told her, Ann, don't lie to my face right now. She laughed, then admitted she did turn it off. Her reasoning was that she didn't want me to be upset that she was late to work that day. I asked her why she would even feel that way and she had no response, just saying it was a stupid thing to do and worry about and she knows that. She eventually deleted the media and apologized for lying about her location sharing. We moved in together in September of 2021, February of 2022. We had a few fights during this time over small things, and a few over big things. One of the bigger fights was in response to me telling her, again, that her words upset me as she said something hurtful around late October/November. She told me, oh, I don't really give a fuck. I've been drinking, I was gonna have a good night, I don't give a shit. I kind of lost it at this point. I didn't understand how somebody could be so indifferent to their so's feelings, especially considering I'd drop everything I was doing to listen to her whenever she had to vent, or if she had a concern my first response was to say, okay, how can I fix this? And then promptly fix it. This night, I forcefully slid a previously lit candle across our dresser, causing the wax to spill out. I ripped my dock charger for Apple products off the wall and threw it on the ground. I didn't know what to do anymore. Ann got off the bed yelling at me, shoved me into the dresser, hit me in my chest, and then started scraping wax off the dresser with a knife, followed by pointing the knife at my face while she yelled at me. We argued for hours about how I felt like there was no respect for how I felt in the relationship up until this point and she fired back by making personal attacks against me. I slept in a separate room for the night and we talked about it the next day. There's not much to say about it except we kind of tried to forget it happened aside from her telling me, after we talked about it, that the fact I wanted to hit back says enough about our relationship. I'm guessing she decided to ignore the fact she'd already shoved and hit me as well as pointed a knife at me. N would occasionally go out with a friend of hers, we'll call her T though every time the two would hang out, T would attempt to hook up with men at the bar, get their numbers, tried to hook up with a coworker on a work trip to Texas, etc. T was in a committed relationship with her live-in boyfriend, L, of 4 years. I told N I thought this behavior was severely wrong and I was uncomfortable with how comfortable T was in confiding in N about it. One night, N went out with T and said she'd be done around 1:30 am, but when I got up and left for work at 4:30 am, N still was not home. We talked about how I thought this was disrespectful to the relationship and that N seems to have issues setting boundaries with people. A woman N was previously intimate with, C, started a group chat between N and her friend, H. C sent nude photos of herself to the group chat because she wanted H and N to make her feel better about herself. H sent nude photos as well, though N told me she didn't send anything and thought the entire chat itself was uncomfortable and weird, poking fun at her friend, H, for sending photos. I found out by a slip of the tongue by H at a group dinner shortly after our conversation that N did indeed send nude photos back to the group chat, just using her hand to cover her breasts. N was very upset with H for giving out this information but told me it shouldn't be a big deal even if she was previously intimate with C. N and I went to a concert with her friend, K. N and K used to go to shows all the time and hook up with guys in bands. One of the bands playing at this show is a band where the frontman and N had shared DMs on Twitter previously and seemed to be very into one another. As it was tradition for N and K to go backstage at shows and meet band guys, I let N know that I wasn't comfortable with that especially given her history with this frontman. After this band played, N and K went to the bathroom, but were gone for over 30 minutes. I found the two of them at an upstairs bar for the venue and eventually learned that they did go backstage. I was upset with N but K tried to defuse the situation by telling me K drug N backstage to look for cocaine. I learned later that the frontman for this band messaged N earlier in the day asking if he would get to meet her that night. We continued on in the relationship into December. N looked through my phone numerous times during our relationship, finding nothing, logged into my IG and Facebook accounts from my computer and found nothing, and of the only issues she had with my communication with another female, a friend of mine who had been intimate with a few years prior. She made it known the instant she saw I received a text message, same day, and I cut contact with that female immediately. The texts were small talk aside from one message where the female made a joke about how I'd never dated her. I agreed that the messages did not need to continue and I understand where N was coming from. N and I went out to some downtown bars and met with her brother and aunt. We came home and N was pretty hammered, so I carried her inside, brought her water, and allowed her to sleep. I decided to check her phone again given the recent issues. Again, I know it's not a healthy thing to do, and saw a long string of text messages between N and a female, A. The messages start back in August and run until the day I found them. Over the course of August to December, the texts show A come over to N's house, stay over, talk about how crazy the last night was and how it was so good. Talk about how N doesn't want A to think N would ever treat A the same way she's treating me. Talk about where they want this to go. A visits N at work, calls her on the way home, and we're making plans to go out on A's boat the next week when I would be at work and N had off. A is also a manager where N worked and is married to another woman, S, who is also a manager at the same workplace. I confronted N about this in the middle of the night. N was frantic and again shoved me multiple times into a wall. N eventually fed me a 3-hour sob story about how A is not a US resident, confides in N about her visa and how her relationship with S is awful and hates taking care of S's child. It was different because we're both women, there's no moving parts. And finally after the two of us were so exhausted from the conversation, we went to bed. I messaged S on Facebook, showing her the texts and letting her know her wife was cheating with my girlfriend. S told me that even though the name was the same, the number isn't. This prompted me to talk with N again, who agreed to show me the number behind the name of the texts, but wouldn't do it. I found out the person she was actually texting the whole time was a male by the name of W, who she'd been sleeping with right before she and I got together. She told me she and W only drank a bottle of wine, smoked, and made out in a hot tub, which I believe none of. And also told me she's cheated in every relationship she's ever been in. N told me that W is the biggest mistake she's ever made in her entire life and that she would do anything to keep our relationship. She told me she continued pursuing W because his family makes good money and so does he. He's easy to control because he doesn't question anything N does, and that if N ever ended up pregnant by W, his family would pay for everything for her and she wouldn't have to work. I made the decision to try and continue the relationship on Christmas Eve, about 5 days after I found out, and for about a week it was working. N would answer my repeated questions and attempt to reassure me of the relationship, though after that short amount of time she started to tell me, "You're gonna have to stop asking questions about it if you ever want to get over it." Despite us talking about how this process could take longer than our entire relationship up to this point to reconcile. N was subsequently fired from her job by the owner for involving A and S in her cheating and using them as scapegoats. N told me I should take responsibility for this as well as feel remorse for her losing her job. Things kind of went downhill from here. I told N that I was now uncomfortable with her going out alone given the circumstances. I told her that privacy on her end is kind of at a standstill and her family started to call me narcissistic and controlling for this. They blamed me for looking through her phone and ignored that she'd been having an affair, and said, "A woman can look through your phone because we get paranoid, it's different." When asked why I was catching so much flack, N told me she'd been reading about twin flames and how one person typically runs from the other and believes that to be our situation rather than acknowledging the fact that she's a cheater. In the first week of February, N and I were in our computer room. N was on her laptop and said, "I wish I could show you these pictures I took of H but I can't because she's naked." I stopped immediately what I was doing because I was so confused. "Why did you take naked photos of H? Why didn't you talk to me about this?" N responded and said, "I told you I was going to take pictures of her today." I said, "Yes, but you didn't tell me they'd be naked. I'm really not comfortable with that. I don't know why you wouldn't tell me about this." N told me she didn't think it was okay that I was uncomfortable with it and that she was going to take more pictures in a few days with H again. N told me the pictures were for H's OnlyFans, which didn't change my stance on it. I'd had enough and snapped. I told N I was leaving and immediately started to pack my things. N stood in front of doorways, not allowing me to pass into rooms with my belongings. She began unpacking my things when I put them in boxes. We started to argue and it devolved into us just personally attacking one another. I had never done this to her previously in the relationship but felt so absolutely decimated by the lack of mutual respect or care I just lost my sense of composure. N left the house for a short time while I was packing and then came back, telling me, "You can't leave. I parked behind you, you're not going anywhere." Though she did eventually move when I told her my family was on the way to help transport boxes. I left the house that day but N and I stayed in contact. We tried to work through this issue even away from the house, but I ended up breaking things off with her in mid-March. The utilities were all in my name and I'd left my silverware, dishes, washer and dryer, and TV at the house for her to use. I told her I would need to get these things in 2 weeks. I'd also been paying all of the utilities since December and told her I'd have to cancel those from my name and she would have to open new accounts in hers. She was severely unhappy with this, and changed the locks on the house as well as changed my login information to the utilities accounts, locking me out. I was able to cancel by calling directly, however. I arrived to get my things at the time I designated since she'd said she would put them in garage, however, she'd still left some things in the house. She'd also installed a camera in the garage to watch me. I had to come back a different day to get them. I started my stages of grief likely after I'd found out she cheated and hit denial right then. After I left the house, I think I went through anger when I told her I was getting my things and canceling utilities. Depression set in shortly after and I reached back out to her and asked her to come over. I was a complete wreck. I bawled my eyes out for 2 hours and vented a bit, telling her that I trusted her. I also started bargaining and asked if she'd been with anyone else already. She'd started new work at a bar and said a girl followed her into the bathroom and pushed her against a stall, making out with her and sticking her hand down N's pants. I can't imagine this wasn't prompted by N, as otherwise this would be sexual assault. I also asked about W, to which N lied. She stated W approached her at the gym recently to say hi. I didn't understand this because I told W I found out about their affair in December and he'd instantly blocked both me and N, and I had N block W. There should be no reason for W to approach N unless something had changed. N lied a few times while we talked about this but eventually told me she'd unblocked him on IG and they had a long conversation in the gym parking lot. I asked why she'd unblocked someone who she felt was the biggest mistake of her entire life and she said why not? I understand that N had no loyalty to me during this time, but I was confused why she was doing these things, as even after our relationship ended a couple weeks prior, she'd told me she wants no one else but me and will do everything she can to be better for me. We stayed in touch for another week or two, up until Easter Sunday. We planned for me to come over the Thursday prior, April 14th, and I did. I stayed the night, we had sex, we made dinner, she called me all the same pet names, and she told me she loved me. I left Friday morning and she headed to work that night. Saturday night N worked a double shift at her bar and asked me to make sure she got in her house safely. I worked night shift Leo in the city she lives in, and I told her I couldn't as I was dealing with a case at the time. We talked Sunday shortly, and while I had extra time on shift I drove by the house to say hi. I saw a truck backed into her driveway with all the lights in the house off except her bedroom LEDs. I was devastated for a second time. I texted and called her but she didn't answer. I continued my shift and drove by one more time at the end of it to see if the truck left, but it seems the driver stayed the night. I went home and left N a voicemail about how she continuously hurts me and not to contact me again unless it's to own up to what she's done. N contacted me the next day at 8 p.m. by text to tell me I apparently didn't love her. We're not together anyway, so why do I care? I was using her and I'm the one that left, because she cheated? And she doesn't care what I say anymore. I told N to fuck off and blocked her. My reason for posting this is multifaceted. I want to remember everything she did to hurt me because I don't want to ignore these signs in someone else in the future, though I know I'm still forgetting some incidents. I want to hold people accountable for their actions and not give them chance after chance. I want help to understand all the feelings I have right now because I still feel like I miss her. I still feel like I want to reach out. I still feel like I want to see her, but I know it's because of trauma bonding or familiarity. I have such a hard time holding an appetite, doing anything I cared about before, communicating with friends. I feel extremely depressed constantly. I have a hard time focusing on tasks. I keep wondering what she's doing and if she's thinking about me. I keep wondering if I did something wrong. But I want to be honest, while I did lose my cool sometimes, I legitimately did everything I possibly could for N. I listened, I offered help when asked, I took over tasks when she became frustrated, I sold and traded vehicles to have a better commuter vehicle for us to use on a road trip, even making sure it was manual and turboed so she'd enjoy it as she was a car girl growing up. I chased down someone that stole her phone on a vacation trip and got all of her information back and kept her safe while doing it. I think you should provide everything you can for your so because you, ideally, chose each other to do life with. It is so hard to forget about someone who continuously told you that you were their end goal, their husband, their life, the father of their future children. Who painted an idea to you that the two of you were supposed to be infinity for each other and then lied to you at every single turn and cheated consistently and then blamed it on you. Someone who told you, you made it. You got the job you wanted, the truck you wanted, and you're leaving me. When you couldn't deal with the cheating anymore. I want to see a therapist but my insurance doesn't kick in until July and I don't have the money to spare on out of pocket right now. I just feel really hurt and lost. Edit, I do have a friend I was able to talk to about this. He has been very supportive and I don't know how I'd have survived without him. I just get very down on myself regardless. Edit, I forgot to mention that after I left and blocked her, she'd started making anonymous IG accounts to view my page. When we talked again before Easter Sunday, I made mention of this to her. She told me, I don't even know why you bother blocking them. Do you have any idea how many emails I have? I'm just going to make more, though I can't keep watching your stories, that's easier for you to find.